You recently said that the Iranian people are in the final stage of our struggle, but have said that people in Iran should refrain from taking to the streets. What do you know about the status of the Iranian people's ability to take down the regime, and what does a timeline look like for something like that at this point?
Well, ever since that massacre of my fellow compatriots, unarmed vis-a-vis a regime that didn't hesitate on taking them down, we had to ask people to stay safe and in their homes until the playing field is equalized, and then give them an opportunity to go back to the streets and take hold of the situation. The timeline is in direct relationship to the amount of neutralization of the repressive forces, and the air campaigns that have been launched against the regime in the last few days has proven to be targeting not just the regime's stronghold, but also elements that could be what the regime has utilized or has been utilizing against the civilian population. I think at the end of this campaign, certainly the opportunity will create itself again, and that will be a safer time for people to retake the streets, and hopefully that will be the final push towards forcing the regime to ultimately collapse and ushering a new era for us.
Have the strikes by the Israelis and the Americans, tens of thousands of them now, set the groundwork for that to happen? Do you think that there's been enough? How much more do you think there needs to be militarily before the people are able to go into those institutions and take them over?
Well, obviously, the air campaign in and of itself doesn't resolve all of the issues, but it certainly has helped tremendously to have impact not only in the sense of neutralizing the regime's elements, but also creating a great level of loss of morale for the regime's troops. The regime has been severely weakened, has been severely decimated, both in terms of its military infrastructure, but also in terms of its leadership. And this is something that simply emboldens the people, while at the same time leaves the regime to a position where many of these elements will have to start thinking, why is it worth it for us to continue being in the line of fire when we know that this ship is sinking?
Have you heard anything about large-scale or small-scale defections from the regime at this point?
Well, there has been a beginning of it. In fact, defections can come in different forms. It could be people completely lining up with you. It is those who are silently not showing up to work anymore or refusing to carry out orders. It's a combination of all of these factors. We're counting on these defections not only because it is necessary at this point to be able to successfully get rid of this regime, but particularly in the post-regime collapse, there are very important factors to help us maintain a stable and strong transition. And as long as they don't have any blood on their hands or have committed any serious crimes, I think that should be part of the solution to help us bring a stable transition. And that's a very important factor, both before the regime collapses, but especially after the regime collapses.
Can you tell us more about that transition period? You formally accepted responsibility to lead this transitional period. What does that leadership look like over the course of the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, the first 100 days is what our project that is called Iran Prosperity Project addresses specifically in over 180 pages of detailed information as to exactly how we propose to manage the first 100 days to stabilize the country, the economy, open up the road towards the election of the first constitutional assembly, where all the political discussions over the future system and the constitution itself will take place. But the country has to be managed in the meantime. So I think a team of highly skilled technocrats and experts will be at work helping us bring in the mechanism of transition, or the leadership team, if you will, a combination of elements that could be from inside and the outside. And that will be what will be immediately taking over control post-regime collapse to manage this transition period. Yeah. The timeline we have in mind is certainly address the first 100 days, but then beyond that, what it will take between then and the final process of normalization, which will be the result of what people will choose for their future government. And then once the parliament and the future governments are elected, the transitional government basically dissolves itself and hands over control to the elected members of the new democratic system in Iran, the parliament, as well as the executive branch.
So we have seen some crowds going out in favor of Mojtaba Khamenei, the new leader of Iran after his father was killed in an airstrike. Does that worry you, seeing these crowds? Are they just propaganda from the regime? And what do you make of his first statement that was through Iranian state media as the leader, given that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said today that they believe he is severely injured and unable to actually lead the country?
Mojtaba Khamenei is no different than his father in terms of being as virulent and aggressive and radical as he is corrupt. And this is one reason why we always said that the Iranian people will not settle for anything else than a clean break from the regime. Any of the surviving elements of this regime will not pass that litmus test. What we are working on are elements that could be in the regime, but are certainly not elements that cannot fit in the future scenario. And we need to cooperate and work with them to bring in that transition. Mojtaba doesn't qualify, and many of the other elements under his control certainly do not qualify in that sense. And I don't think that Mojtaba Khamenei, regardless of what kind of campaign of publicity or propaganda that the regime has always managed to do through its instrument, would be able to be persuasive in any form or shape. This is the last desperate act of trying to cling on to power, but I don't think they will succeed. This regime is extremely weak, on the verge of collapse, and ultimately we need to make sure that it is totally gone to put an end to all the problems that we're facing and offer an end game to us Iranians and to the rest of the world.
How do you plan, if there are IRGC remnants, you've offered some of them, if they don't have violent records or they're willing to come to the table and change their ways, a bit of an amnesty to work with a new government. But what is your plan to prevent revenge killings and from certain sectors of Iran from devolving into a civil war? What is your plan to keep that from happening and keep it together should you be put back in power?
Well, it's always the remnants that everybody needs to be considering as to exactly how do you deal with them. It also depends on to what level they would have been decimated as a result of the current campaigns. But in general, again, as I say, elements that are the most radical and the most corrupt will probably at the top leadership take flight. And the ones that remain are dissatisfied with the regime itself. But don't forget, many of them considered it a job. And they're working at it. They don't want to go down with this sinking ship.
Have you had conversations with Trump administration officials about your plans, and have they expressed anything about your potential leadership in the country if the regime were to fall?
The plan that I discussed at the international level is not something that is done behind the walls. It's not a secret. It's actually quite transparent. It's online.
Right, but have you
correct?
Yes, have you had? Yes, of course. But have you had direct conversations with the Trump administration, either at the White House or at the State Department, Secretary of State Marco Rubio? The president himself has issued some skepticism of anybody trying to take leadership at this point. He wants to be involved in the next leader of Iran and choosing that person. So have you had any direct conversations with the administration about your plans?
Well, since it was made public, I've been in contact to the administration via the channel of Steve Witkoff. And of course, I'm sure the rest of the messaging has been relayed, at least on the administration side. I've been also talking to members of Congress, both Senate and House, over what it is that we are doing to keep them informed and briefed. Same thing goes at the international level. But key players right now being, of course, Israel on the one hand, and they're doing what they're doing, and we all see that, but also especially as it relates to President Trump, I'm sure that President Trump has certainly showed that he will be supportive of whatever the Iranian people will decide. I don't think that he would be saying that I get to pick the future leader. It's up to the Iranian people. And I think that the first comment he made about the issue was that, let's see what the people have to say. What this regime has done was nothing other than going against the interest of the free world and has been always hostile to the United States, whereas what we bring to the table is not only a future of peace and stability, but fruitful cooperation and, if you will, even beyond the politics of it, good business and good trade with the free world, and particularly with our American counterpart. This is what really is at stake at the end of the day. It's not just ensuring a stable transition so the U.S. doesn't have to be in a prolonged way involved in the area, but also know that at the end of the day, it's good for Iranians, it's good for Americans, and it's only bad for the regime. And one last word, as far as Iran is concerned, I want you to remember that the sacrifice that many of my compatriots have done, and tens of thousands of them have been killed, they have always said that this is not just our fight to liberate ourselves. We are also fighting for the free world. They should recognize that we are their best bet, and they should align themselves for once with us, the people of Iran, as opposed to more than 4 decades of appeasement, thinking that this regime will change its behavior. As long as that consideration is now seriously made, I think now we have a real good chance of success.